What is up, everybody? Welcome back to TCGU on our FF podcast. I am Travis, your host, back again with my co-hosts. They would like to introduce themselves.
What's up, homies? Zest back at it again with everyone.
Yo, it's Byron.
And Noah's having some audio issues. So, yeah, Noah's a robot. So, yeah. As always, I would like to shout out our junior and higher. Oh my God, Noah!
I'm talking.
Fucking everyone. As always, shout outs to our Patreon junior and higher sponsors: AD, Andrew Dang, Anthony Albano, Bryce Rasak, Clay Cardwell, Jacob Arshin Masur, Jay Rogers, Jesse Servini, Jesse Morrison, Jesse Nix, Justin Farce, Kat Maria, Kevin Broberg, Kieran Vision, Kyle Creswick, Lucinda Letica, Orlando Valdez Santos, Paul Casagrande, Ransom MacArthur, Samantha Stevens, the baddest bitch around, Sean O'Brien, Timothy M. Friedlieb, Tamer's Evolution TCG, and Tyler Zane Pease. And also shout out to our wonderful sponsors: Nuclear Ink Custom Tattoo and Skate Shop, Red Riot Games, Cards Custom Build, Ink Gaming, and Dex Protection.
Hey.
Good job.
Hey.
Well done.
Yep.
That's the show, guys. Goodbye.
All right, so our first topic, gentlemen, I actually wanted to bring this to everyone because I'm really big about numbers, right? Especially
How
when
big?
it comes to overall deck design. And when it comes to figuring out what is the magic number of backups that I need on board for my deck to operate, I really started exploring this because I, with help from there was a guy named Curtis that I ran into at Reunion, and he had I've been talking about mono lighting for a while now because he's been playing it since Opus 1.
Mm-hmm.
He got me inspired to actually start playing mono lighting again. And as I found out from him, the critical mass of backups you need for mono lighting is 5. Mono lighting actually pops once you actually get to 5 backups.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically what it translates to is that every turn you break something. And if your opponents can't get over that slow grind, they lose.
Yeah.
And the advantage with it is that it's a straight break.
Yeah, you're talking about the 5 CP Sakura, right?
Yeah, because discarding 3 cards in your hand to play Sakura and she 8Ks a forward, killing it, and then you immediately dole all 5 of your backups and break another forward.
Yeah.
That's 2 forwards broken for 6 CP. That's super good.
Yeah, I have loved that card ever since I read it. It was a very good card.
The
When
fact
did you
that you overpay for it and then kill 2 forwards is super good.
Yep.
Okay, so then, Travis, take your 5-head, 6-head, your Rainbow Six Siege deck. That's what we called it, Rainbow Six Siege. What would you say is the critical backup number?
Okay, so the critical backup number is 4, I believe. Because 4 is when I can cast 3 to 4 things with Tilica by just popping off with lock and all that stuff. It also lets me play basically everything I want to play in a turn, especially with Tilica. Without Tilica, I'd say it's probably 5. Because I think that's pretty dependent on whether I have Tilica or not.
Fair enough.
Makes sense.
Byron, you got mono water, mono fire, and whatever else. What do you think would be your sweet spot?
So mono water is probably anywhere from 2 to 3.
I was gonna say 3.
And I think it just depends what you're drawing. Because obviously if you have Yuna down as one of your backups, that's most of your game plan, just because you're trying to cheat out the Famfrits, you know?
Yeah,
So
and
definitely
Yuna's a backup and a half.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, exactly. So
Very
definitely I think at the early game is definitely 2, but like if it gets any later, like if it gets past the mid game and whatnot, definitely 3 to 4, obviously.
Mhm.
Obviously, by that time you should honestly have all 5 backups already for mono water, because
Right.
like you're really setting up with mono water since the beginning. Like you're not really going to be playing any forwards unless you're like getting aggroed out. Then you kind of have to, and so that's why like I think 2 is definitely like the sweet spot, just because it
Mhm.
also helps with playing Layla Viking, and
Yep.
you're not really losing out, and you're kind of gaining advantage in that way. So you're not like losing
Right.
cards per se.
Right. So right there, actually, Layla Viking brings me to a really good example question. So that just shows like the threshold of 1 backup to 2 is incredibly important because on 1
Hmm.
backup you still need to lose 2 cards to play Layla Viking,
Yep.
whereas for 2 backups you just need to get rid of Viking and you can play Layla and then you draw
Hmm.
a card.
Yep.
And whereas for my mid-range chocobo list, it works fine on 1 backup. If I can
Yep.
get at least 1 backup down, I can then at that point play a good majority of my chocobos by just getting rid of a single card in my hand, or I play one of the 1-drops. Now, if I can get to 2 backups, then that means Bart's comes out for 1 card less, and that could be the difference between actually being able to keep sustainable board pressure, or I have to overpay and overcommit, and then I get punished for it.
Yeah. So
And then good.
yeah, you're good. I think this question is highly situational and dependent on a lot of different variables.
Mhm.
I
Well,
think
for sure.
that unless your deck is literally not playing backups at all or is built fundamentally to function on 1 to 2 backups, every deck in FFTCG likely wants to be on 4 to 5 backups at some point in the game. But other variables change that. Like
Mhm.
Hmm.
like Byron said, getting aggroed out, you probably won't have time to build a bunch of backups if your opponent's beating your face in.
Yep.
See, I can't argue that point. Is that when it comes to like building like critical back row, that's when you incorporate backups that also deal as like removal, right?
Yeah.
This is where EV, your aces, your black mages, Lulu, all those other little backups that when you play them, they kill something in addition to that. That way you're able to build back row while still dealing with a forward. That's also why I think Cloud is so good, is because when you play Cloud and you kill a dark forward, you're still building back row.
Yeah.
And then, as I mentioned before, and you brought up a good point with this, like Water Lightning aggro with like Zidane and like Sid mid, the deck literally doesn't need to play backups.
Yeah.
It lives and dies by your hand. And if you have like a spare turn or two, you can play like a backup or two, that's fine.
Yeah.
But a majority of the time, that deck plays itself from its hand.
Yeah.
And then with like other like tempo oriented decks like Marsh Ritz, they like having 3 backups. And by having 3 backups, you can refund every attack with Ritz to its maximum amount. And
Yeah.
on top of that, you then are able to then cast Amaterasu, Mist Dragon, Ifrit, so on, so on, so on.
True.
And the reason I bring up like for Mono Lightning is that for Mono Lightning, getting to 5 backups, like you mentioned, that allows Sakura to pop off. It means Adea can kill 5 drops.
Yep.
It means that you can play 2 Odins in a turn. And if you're breaking 2 forwards every turn to every other turn, you're winning that game.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Like straight up.
Yep.
And also you can then play what's his name? Libertus off of backups without feeling bad.
Yeah.
Because 5 cost Libertus, I don't know how many times you guys have played with him, but he sucks if you only have 1 backup.
Yeah.
The man is awful.
Yep.
When you get to 3 backups, he's pretty okay because then you get Nyx and you activate 2 backups, and you discard a card and play Nyx.
Yeah.
And AC, that's where the math gets super important, right? Because you have to discard 2 cards to play Libertus off of 1 backup, and you have to discard another 2 cards to play Nyx. Whereas
Yep.
if I'm on 3 backups, I only have to discard 1 card for both of them each.
Yep.
I'm saving myself 2 cards in like the long run, so to
It's
say. I
a
do
huge
have to lose like 2 cards to play those 2 backups, but in the long run, I'm saving myself 2 cards.
Yeah. It is a huge difference.
Mhm.
I also kind of think that also, that kind of like you got to think about how your backups to progress when you're in a deck too. Just because you're when you pitch a card, you usually when you start at the beginning, you only want to pitch one card to play a 2 CP backup, right?
Normally,
And then you kind of build up. You build up from there. So like next card you probably want to play is a 3 CP backup.
mm.
So like it just kind of like helps with the progression, I guess.
So here's
Like, you
another
got to think
part of it
about
too.
that.
Another part of it also is that I'm okay overpaying for my searcher if it means I can secure mid game.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because
That's fair.
if I can get myself to mid game, that overpay I did for the 3 CP backup doesn't matter. Because that 3C backup has already doled itself 3 to 4 times and paid for itself.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then anything else after that is gravy.
And that's another reason why it's so important to play backups that also like either replace themselves or like have a double function, I guess you would say, because you're not always going to open that 2 CP backup that you want. So that's why stuff like Minfilia is just so important, because sometimes you're going to open a Minfilia and you're just going to have to pitch 2 other dudes and just get them back with your Minfilia and play it as a 2 CP backup.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like optimally, Minfilia is like a mid game piece that you like discard a card and you play as your 5th backup.
Yep.
And the other thing that sucks about like trying to do the Minfilia or the Sid Previa route, where you're trying to do that as your opening backup, having that get Rotsued or Mistdragoned sucks.
Yeah. It sure
Like,
does.
Yeah.
Like turn 1 Ratsu Mistdragon gets you ahead, because for Sid Previa it means, well, crap, I can't grab my 3-drop backup, which means I'm being denied a search. And Minfilia, it's so backbreaking.
Yeah.
You basically just threw 3 cards into the Aether.
True.
And your opponent still has 2 cards that they can recur. And if they're playing Earth, that means they're playing Cryo, which means they can do it again.
So what do you guys think in terms of like the number of backups? I mean, I know it matters per deck, but like what do you think is a general nice number of backups to have in a deck then as well? That way you see what you want to see in time.
So I still believe in the golden number of 17. I still think that's a very perfect number to start adjusting. If you're an aggressive deck that's very forward reliant, like 30 plus forwards, then you're okay running 15 backups, because a majority of your deck is going to be forward based. Like more forwards means you have more gas. And then you have like 5 slots to play around with if you want to play monsters, more forwards, or a summon or 2.
Yeah. I think honestly, the golden number for me has been between 12 and 18, depending on what my deck is trying to do and what my backups do themselves. I'm more inclined to play less backups if my backups can search other backups, or if my forwards can search my backups. So it all depends on what kind of card effects you're playing and what your deck is trying to do, honestly.
So here's a good question, Travis. So when it comes to like that searching aspect, do you do it as a like 3-to-1 ratio, or you do it as a 2-to-1 ratio? Where like for every 3 cards that can search this backup, I can cut 1 more backup.
I'd say it's probably a 3-to-1 ratio, honestly. Because at the end of the day, if I want to search the card badly enough, that means I also want to draw the card, so I don't have to search for it. So cutting down on it just because I have searchers is something I try to shy away from.
Right, because then if you can't hit your searchers, then you can't draw it, and that means you're spending the entire game looking for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like for me, I'd say 16 to 18, just as a
16, 18
general rule of
number.
thumb. Yeah.
So I've been on 3 different sides of the fence, right? I've been on I'm playing Chocobos that only has like 5 backups, but like 30 plus forwards.
Yep.
I've also been on like directly in the middle of the fence playing Earth, Fire, Marsh, Ritz with like 16 backups, but all the refunding from Ritz made it worth it. And then you guys remember my Fire Lightning stall deck where that deck played 24 backups
Yeah.
because the 5-cost Lulu consumes so many backups, you have to play more to keep feeding her.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And the other thing too is that by running so many backups, it meant that I ran less forwards, which means that it helped invalidate removal a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to kind of like bring it up, and so that way, like the nice bow to kind of tie on this topic is that like determining like the difference between 1 backup to 2 for your deck, and then determining how important like 3 to 4 is, right? Because that backup you're playing could be 2 CP to play another card and actually start getting ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so
I like that explanation.
like you're robbing yourself tempo because like a lot of people are like, well, I have this backup in my hand, I really want to play it. Or it's like burning that backup to play a super important forward to keep you from dying or progressing your game state, rather than like losing tempo and just playing another backup. And then like kind of crossing your fingers on hopefully I can pick back up with 4 backups as opposed to 3. Because if you're a deck that like runs fine off of 3 backups, there's no real reason for you to build to 4.
Yeah. So, something I'd like to talk about real quick is I think a lot of people are stuck in the mentality that you can just sit there and try to build the 5 backups and then do whatever you're trying to do. Because it seems in all the games I've played, a lot of people have been uncomfortable with just playing at 1 backup in order to play their hyper efficient threat and then build back up from there.
Yeah.
Which I honestly think is crazy to me, because there have been so many games where I've just hard won because I decided to take a turn off to play my hyper efficient threat and then on like 1 or 2 backups and then build back up from there and force them to deal with it, so they have to take turns off and lose tempo in order to deal with my threats.
I can see that. So by a hyper efficient threat, what is that to you? Like, is it the 3-drop Y'shtola? Is it
That would be like your Tenzens, your Eggs Deaths, your locks, stuff like that.
So I like that you bring up Tenzin as an example, because I'll be honest, the amount of games that I turn 1 Tenzin and won were statistically higher than games where I like turn 2, turn 3 Tenzin, right?
Yeah.
Or I play him like middle of the match. Like the games where I just barf out Tenzin, and then if he grabs me a 2, like to quote Erica from over in like Japanese Australia land,
Mhm.
turn one Tenzin backup is like the strongest opener in this game right now.
Yeah, I would be
Because,
inclined to agree with that.
because he grabs you another backup and then you just beat them to death with a 9k.
Yeah, and you get to build while they have to sit there and figure out how to out your Tenzin.
Mm-hmm. And then even if they do, you pick up the samurai that you paid into them.
Yep.
And it's really good if it's like a Cyan that's like air quotes hiding inside of in your break zone, because then you just pick up that Tenzin and you play that Tenzin off of 1 backup, and then you play Tenzin right behind Cyan. Now they have to deal with Cyan and Tenzin.
Yeah.
And if you can out Tenzin twice, then cool. I think the game's over at that point.
Yeah.
But even for like samurais, like it operated fine off of 2 backups, because Cyan and Aroha were able to do 10,000 damage to a board.
Yeah. Well, I think this was a pretty good topic.
Fair. Yeah, I wish I could chime in more on that, but backups isn't my biggest specialty. I kind of play around 17 to 18. It's one of those 2 numbers in just about any of my decks, and I probably say 3 is my magic number for backups in general.
And honestly, Noah, I'll be honest with you, I've seen you do a lot more Ooga Booga forwards than like playing backups.
Yeah, like I've hardcore played the Shikari deck on like 1 backup, but done well with it. I've played my Turks deck on like 1 or 2 backups and then just said, "All right, cool, we'll go in." So
Yep.
you do get
No,
Cloud who kind of ramps
and
through.
and like what blows my mind is that the fact that Shikaris can still win without backups.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
it's so dumb. Like, that shouldn't exist.
They're so cheap and affordable, and they're able to. I don't want to say hold the board well, but they're able to put themselves out there and just kind of like confuse your opponent a bit. Because like I've seen a lot of people target the wrong one. In my opinion, the Shikari you always target is X, because if you don't target or right X is the one that gives the others haste. If you don't target X, then it doesn't matter if the others have haste. They don't get to do the automatic re-damage to you.
See, here's the problem that I see, Noah. Targeting the one with X, that's not the one you want to target. Because all he is that he's the payoff, he's the finisher. He's the one that procs both the other two, right? If it's early game, you have to kill Z, because that means they can't draw cards. If we're about to approach mid game, kill Y, so that way I don't get the free activations. Because I can draw all the cards I want. If I don't have the back to kill him, then it doesn't matter.
I personally think X is like the bigger threat with the way people play the deck. So if you're able to get rid of X, then you have less to worry about when it comes towards that kill turn. But yeah, it
So
kind of just does depend on where you are in the game for which one you want to ping off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would even say that there's like a most important one to ping off, because they're all pretty equally threatening. But if you're approaching, like, let's say you're at like 2 or 3 damage, you do not ever want to eat that 3 damage unless your deck runs off of damage 5, because
Mhm.
that is actually just backbreaking. So obviously
Yeah.
that's the one you remove in that situation. But if you're at like damage 0 still, you don't care if you eat 3 damage. Like, that's fine. They just activated your damage 3. You can block one of their dudes, kill something off, and call it good.
So, you guys want to call for our ad here and then get into our other 2 topics?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Hello, and welcome to the ads. Here by Cards Custom Builds. Are you into cosplay? Are you looking to get into cosplay? Well, then Cards Custom Builds is here to help. Cards Custom Builds creates everything from cosplay accessories like props, trinkets, and weaponry, all the way to full costumes. Their work is guaranteed to make you the talk of the con. So, head over to Cards Custom Builds either on their Facebook or their Etsy account. The link will be down in the description down below. And make sure you mention TCG University to get 5% off your entire order. I've seen a lot of Clay's costumes that he's made. I forgot the word even though I've said it 20 times. They're all very, very cool. It's really awesome work, and Clay's a real cool guy. It's Tam's dad, and you should really go check it out. If you want to get into cosplay when this entire pandemic is over, that is an excellent place to start. This episode is also brought to you by Deck Protections. Deck Protections is our never-ending pursuit to create the highest quality storage and protection accessories. Their design and innovation comes from die-hard gamers and collectors just like you, so they know what you want in the products that you buy. They are constantly taking in feedback from their customers. Then they have no plans to stop their innovations or their drive to refine their products until they are recognized as the leader in the industry. I can't read very well. They make a terrific product, all with the avid gamer and collector in mind, so go ahead and check them out. Link will be out in the description down below. They make cool stuff, and when we can finally go out again, you're gonna want to snazz up all your cards that you're going to be bringing with some cool new boxes and stuff. So please go check them out. Dex Protections, link is in the description down below. And lastly, I would like to talk with you about Red Riot Games. They're a Canada-based online seller of MTG, Pokemon, and Universes cards. They are friends of the show. Great guys. We like them a whole lot. And if you go to redriotgames.ca, you can use our creator code TCGU when you check out, and you can help support the show. So please, if you want to get some new cards for the new year and get ready for all the fun tournaments that you're going to go to, please go to redriotgames.com or redriotgames.ca. They're in Canada and they're not in the US, so it's not .com. And please buy from them. It would mean a whole lot to us. Thank you, and back to the show.
All right, guys, welcome back. We're going to move on to topic number 2. That one I want to say is locally grown and owned. This
I
was
love this one.
brought to us by Zeth, so I'll let him explain, kick it off, and then we'll all jump in after.
All right. So let's say you're fresh off FFTX, right? You just looked at the reunion list and you're like, whoa, I really like that Dragoon list. Or holy crap, I really enjoy that 3-color Storm list that won like first place at that event. That's super cool. I'm going to build that deck right now. So you fully build the deck. You get your experience with it. You fishbowl it a little bit. You have a general idea on how to play the deck. You take it to your locals and you get trashed. But then the first thing you're thinking is like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm playing a high-end deck. It's not that I'm a bad player and I'm playing a good deck. Why am I getting thrashed? And then you start looking around at what your opponents are playing. They're playing mono wind aggro, like Earth Lightning 15. Like they're like outside of like the grand spectrum of like the meta, air quotes, because COVID has kind of prevented us from getting an actual meta.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations where you actually have to kind of look at it and go, okay, this is what I'm playing against, and these are the play styles of my local play group. How do I maximize like the deck that I choose to play while also still being able to actually enjoy the deck that I'm playing? And that's when it comes to, all right, if I really like playing Storm, right? Like I still want to play 3-color Storm. I then have to figure out, do I play a third Shantoto? Do I need to play a third Fina to deal with aggro? Is it control matchups that I'm losing in, so I need to actually start playing like a couple of better searchers? Do I actually need to include Guido with Pandemonium, not Guido, Barreleye with Pandemonium to have more board wipes? Like it really comes down to like figuring out like if I'm playing an X meta, if I have so like, and the reason I bring up like the locally like owned and grown kind of thing is like if I have this apple tree and I take the freshest apple from it and I go to a market, but it turns out I take it to a market where everyone else is selling apples that are different like flavors and like varieties and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, no one wants to buy my apples because everyone else's like apples look a lot fresher.
Mm.
So what I would need to do then is actually like change my stand a little bit, try a different kind of, or even start selling pairs, right?
Pairs are good. Mm.
Pairs are really good. And like where I'm going with that analogy is that if this is what I'm going to be like putting out, so that way I actually like have a chance against the other decks, then I really need to pay attention to like play styles and like the kind of like, because how I play in a local is going to be entirely different than how I play in a tournament. Because like my local is hyper aggressive. People play 2 forwards turn 1. And
Yeah.
about 5 times out of 6, one of them has haste. And so at that point, I have to play a lot differently than how I would play in like Reunion. Reunion was a very mid-rangey, grindy tournament where a lot of decks that you face, you're going to mid-game. Unless your opponent drew like super piss poor, which didn't happen a lot.
Yeah.
And with a lot of those decks being samurai, even if they drew poor and they throw out Tenzin, it basically saved the deck.
Yeah.
And for Reunion, that's where it's like a little bit more long-term play. Whereas for a person like coming to their locals for the first couple of times, like it might be like super forward based, or it's going to be we both build 5 backups, or my opponents play a lot of summon interaction. That means that you're going to have to like look at your recipe and slot in a couple of new cards or slot in like a couple of old cards to ensure that you keep up. Because I can, keep going and selling apples all day, but if no one buys them, I mean, then I'm losing out, and then I'm not having fun.
Yeah.
So
Noah, do you have any thoughts? Oh, Byron, go ahead.
so so I am the kind of person that doesn't like to change my deck depending on, if I'm playing locally or if I'm going to a big tournament.
Right.
Just because I wouldn't changing a couple cards definitely changes the feel of a deck sometimes.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I want to be confident with what I have built in
Mhm.
locals or even in bigger tournaments.
Mhm.
So I try to stray away from changing cards in my deck, and I try to keep the same deck no matter what kind of tournament I'm going to. But obviously, one of the things I do wish that Final Fantasy kind of had was if it did 2 out of 3 games and then also had a sideboard, because that's like where you kind of can mess around with it a little bit more because you're not changing your actual deck.
Mhm.
Instead, you have cards that you can filter in and depending on what you actually play against and locally.
Mhm.
So that's kind of I wish they did have that, but I mean I understand that it's also nice playing just best of ones too, just because it's kind of quicker.
Right.
But yeah, I tried not to change my deck too much, depending on if I'm playing locally or if I'm going to a big
Mm.
tournament.
So you're a very I make the recipe once and it's fine kind of guy.
Yeah, essentially, but and it takes me a long time to actually have that recipe built. So like
Mhm.
I take a long time to build a deck because I want to have it built right the first time.
Right.
So I don't actually like start playing with the deck until I feel confident with what I'm actually looking at for like list wise. Like each card, I'm happy enough to actually want to play with those cards right
Mhm.
away. So
Exactly.
it takes me a while for me to actually have an actual deck recipe built.
So to kind of piggyback off what Byron was saying, ever since I kind of started playing Weiss Wars and playing that game a lot, I have always had the motto that you should take your locals with a grain of salt. And what I mean by that is you shouldn't be changing any like major facets of your deck around your local meta. You should still be paying attention to what the overall meta is if you can. Obviously, stuff like COVID prevents you from doing that. But and even if you're getting smashed by, let's say you're playing against somebody random playing headhunters, for example. Let's say they're just playing what you consider to be a less than stellar deck and they're just smashing you every time. Well, there are a lot of things you can do to fix that aren't just, oh, let me change my deck around to counter this random headhunter player. And that has a lot to do with not only your mechanics and the way you play the game, but knowing how your opponent plays the game.
Mhm.
I think it's less of a I need to change my deck thing and more I need to change my mental thing.
Yeah. So for you, it's a game
I
sense.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that, Travis.
Yep.
Makes sense. I like that. Noah?
Noah's frozen in time. And he has the biggest bruh face.
I'm done with that. Wow. So what I would say is if your deck does what your deck's supposed to do, leave it be. Keep playing the deck. Local metas do not define competitive metas by
They-
any. I mean, they can, but like by any means, you're not basing your deck around your local meta if you plan on playing competitively.
Yeah.
So it does come to a game sense thing. I've seen that a lot of the decks we have at LWG are pretty aggressive, but a lot of the decks I tend to start kind of mid range esque. They're not as hyper aggressive.
Mhm.
So I can't just like hit them on the backswing because they overdid their resources or something like that. Um, I I'd say you want to encompass as much as you can in your deck. That doesn't stray it too far. I believe we've said that before. You kind of
Mhm.
want to have cards that can be your catch-alls.
Oh yeah, having universal
While your deck
cards
still is,
solves a lot of problems.
Yeah.
like Lael is a always going to be my answer for like Amaterasu's or something. But if I have a Lael, it can get around a lot of summons that could probably stop my deck the turn I don't need them to. Um, you kind of just got to know how your opponent's playing their deck compared to how you're playing yours, and then do your best to play around with what you have. You never want to build your deck specifically around one person.
Yeah. It's kind of like seeing like, it's like seeing like your competition and like seeing what they're growing and then making a better guess on like, okay, if you're growing oranges to my apples, what makes your like what do you enjoy about oranges, and then like you just kind of like break it down from there on seeing where their the fruits of their labor turn out to be compared to what yours turn out to be. And worst case scenario, you could have your local decks and then you can have your competitive decks.
Yep.
Because if you design a deck where you're going to be very successful at your local and you have a good understanding of your local meta, which also changes over time because people get tired of losing to the same deck.
Yep. Travis.
What? Fuck you mean? The great Matthew does not lose.
There were people at locals that changed around decks you played.
Oh yeah. I thought you were talking about me losing to people constantly.
No.
Oh, dude. Big Matsu does not lose consistently.
Whoa.
My Turks would like to have a word with you when they were first introduced. Just want to put that out there.
That's funny.
Hey man, 2 games does not count, okay?
That was not 2 games. 2 games may be recorded.
I think y'all need to throw hands and like build like 5 decks and just play against each other for like a lot of games. See what happens.
I bet.
Travis is gonna play the same deck just with less or more colors.
I'll sweep him under the rug. It's okay.
So all right, and that just kind of brings me to a side thing then. Is that if we do kind of like a 5 decks thing, let's set the prerequisite that you can't have like 6 of one card between like 2 decks.
Yeah, so you do it like they do in Magic teams, where you can't have more than like 2 play sets of a card in across your decks.
Exactly. So that way we don't have Travis playing the same deck with just different tech cards.
Yeah. Although I wouldn't do that anyways, because I don't need to do that to whoop Noah's ass.
Ooh,
Hey.
them some words.
Sorry about that one, buddy.
Well, no, speechless. You can't say
Whatever.
anything.
I'm not speechless. I've proven myself good enough that I can whoop Travis's ass, so I don't need to say anything more. You can go look at videos.
I broke him beyond belief.
So
I will say something though, really quick.
go ahead.
Noah, I fucking hate your Weiss deck because it shits on mine.
Are you talking about you're talking about my Mugen deck? The memeiest
Yeah, you
shit
little
I could
trash
ever
ass
think of?
here.
All right, Zeph, listen to this,
Beat
right?
the shit out of
So
mine.
this deck says I play 0/0s, so like little shitters. They're actual shitters because they have 5k power, or 500 power. They're dumb. That say when they die, if your dude's a level 0, I bottom deck it, so you don't get it in your waiting room, and your deck gets more full as you're getting rid of climaxes. So I'm gonna hit you for more shit. Then I play a 2/1 that says if you play anything of higher cost than your current level at the start of the climax phase before attacks even happen, bottom deck all that shit.
That sounds dumb.
So Byron's deck, unfortunate for him that I have the biggest silver bullet for his deck, plays standby, which means free play higher level shit than your current level.
Yep.
So when I get to level 2, all of his like good standby targets don't actually do shit, because the second he goes to attack, they go to the bottom.
That's so dumb.
It's a meme. We didn't realize this until after I like sat there and played the deck against it, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of shitty." But like, hey, I'm down, dude.
It almost made Byron quit Weiss.
It did. It
I
did.
was so fucking pissed.
God damn.
I don't play Mugens anymore. I play the fun early play esque deck Travis built. So
Yeah.
Good.
I still play Gurren Lagann. Fuck you. You show up on Saturday, I'm bringing that deck. Don't try me.
Dude, I can't play
Anywho.
Weiss.
Anywho, so back on topic with
Yep.
so I bring it up because like there is once in a while like I talk to friends of mine that are getting into the game and like, hey Zess, so like here's my problem is like my friends play like these 2 or 3 decks that aren't like, you know, on the grain meta, and I'm getting my face kicked in. What do I do? And this isn't about like, you know, player skill, because player skill is an entirely different concept, right? This comes down more to like if this is the deck that you enjoy playing and this is the deck that you want to like see about actually like managing a win with and like whatever your play group is, then you know picking 2 or 3 cards out of it to adjust the ratios on to give you that advantage to actually start playing out the game, that's fine. And as an addendum to like Byron's point, the reason why I like Final Fantasy so much over like Magic and stuff like that is that I can kind of turn my brain off a little bit on the okay, it's one round and then it's over. It's like a death match, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like for like Magic and Universes, the fact that I have to play 2 hours against one person would cause my brain to boil out of my skin.
Yeah, that's my only issue with big Magic tournaments and like big Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments and big UFS tournaments is like your brain is fried by the time you get to tops if you get there.
Right, because
it's terrible.
If you don't misplay up to that point.
Yeah. You literally have to just have like you have to have the diamond brain in order to withstand all of the mental pressure that you're put under
like,
in these events.
So that's why you've never
instance-
topped Travis.
Ooh.
Yeah, my brain is
Damn,
much
you
by the
fucking
end of an
squirt.
event.
I mean, like, I always, when people say that, I always look back to, what was it, 2018's, one of the first PTCs of 2018 for UFS was, like, in Chicago or whatever, and Tyner was playing Shinnok, who clearly states that you can't cancel any of his abilities. And a guy tried to overly dramatic a Shinnok ability at, like, it was the final round before tops, and Mark just kind of, like, spaced out and let it happen when it shouldn't. I'm just like, hey man, those tournaments fucking kill you. It just
the mortality of Shinnok is the brain of his player. Jesus
yeah,
Christ.
like that's what it
awful.
was.
God, that's funny.
But
So-
yeah.
On to our final topic then.
Yep.
Final topic. This one comes to you again from Zeth. This man's our topic creator. I love this man so much. This is why we have the title From Scions with Love.
So
This
I'm
is Science of
gonna
Scions.
off this one, gentlemen.
He gets the glasses off. He's Chris Ray Gunn.
So I want you gents to know, all right? I love Final Fantasy. I love the game in general. Like, it is probably the most fantastic game, like TCG wise, that I've enjoyed out of everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has, all things considered, a good stack mechanic. It has, overall strong cards, and there's a lot you can do in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you see, there's this particular, and don't get me wrong, I love, and I'm prefacing this that I love tribal decks. I love tribal decks even if they're not that good, right? And Warriors of Light, Dawn Warriors, not Head Hunters, Sin Hunters for like the Shikaris, or like Samurai, like having some level of like tribal, like that's the main draw of Final Fantasy. You pick the tribal that best represents you. What I don't understand is that if there's a brand new player and they come onto the scene and like, hey guys, I'm looking to, get into Final Fantasy. All right, cool. What's your favorite Final Fantasy? 14. I really love the Scions. You mean the Scions of the Seventh Dawn? Yeah, I really love all those characters. Okay. Do they have cards for all of them? Well, yeah, they have a whole starter deck. Oh, wow, really? I'm going to go buy it.
The crippling depression on Zeth's face.
Yep.
And then what ends up happening is that they take the starter deck and they make the adjustments for like the legendary Scions and stuff like that for like the few that they're missing. And then they start playing it. And it's like, look at all my 8 forwards, and like this one does this because I have 8 forwards, and this one does that because I have 8 forwards, and they all have haste because of my 1 backup. And then from the mist, they see this ice card, a generic unit, a lizard man, a Bonga, if you will, who has the visor over and his hand extends out into the mist, and it says, I take no damage from any forward with haste or first strike. And the Scion player has a heart attack and falls onto the floor. as all of a sudden their Yitas can't yeet it off the board, and Y'shtola can't deal 8k damage to it because she has haste. And then the Scion player has night terrors about Trickster and his goggled face.
God.
So I preface this story because I see too often in groups and even in like the general like NA chat on, oh, you're a new player? Go ahead and play Scions. It's only a $20 deck. The problem is that with Scions, it's like in and of themselves, it is a very forward-centric build. Like that's the first problem.
Mm.
And if you really look through like their forward lineup, a good majority of them are under curve. A good majority of them rely on very particular Scions and very particular sequencing to actually get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that gives them all haste is the same cost as Nordstalin, which guarantees you find another backup. Now, you could probably counteract this, but Zeth, we have Fire Alice and Fire Alphanon now. That lets us search for characters. That lets us find our Scion backups, right? Again, here's the problem. They're fire cards. A majority of Scion's support is lightning.
Yeah.
I keep playing lightning cards and fire cards and earth cards in the same deck, because then you're playing 3-color Scions, and then you can't play the backup Alice Alphanod because they're the forwards, right?
Mm.
And then you kind of run into this spiraling problem of like, I have to start playing other fire cards to ensure that I'm able to actually play Alice Alphanod, or I have to start playing Tyro. And then you then end up with this amalgamation of like a deck that it isn't Scions anymore. It's like a Earth Lightning deck with like a sub Scion theme.
Mm-hmm.
And like Scions was like is like the staple example of the snowball deck, where if you don't deal with my 6 Scions, you lose. But the problem that I see now is that there's so many decks that they get the same effect from 2 forwards as opposed to 6.
Yep.
They don't have any like global cost reducers. Like their searchers are very like linear. So like Papalimo into like Yida. And even then, like the main reason people play Scions is because of Yida being like a 2-drop 10k, which I mean, we have Shadowlord now.
Yeah.
That doesn't require like a field to be good.
Yeah.
So I bring this to the table because like I really want to like bring into the light on what it really means on what people are drawn to play Scions, and then like Travis mentioned, what are some suggestions that give that Scion feel without having to build Scion, without having to play Scions.
Yeah.
Floor's open, gentlemen.
I feel that. So I actually like while you were doing all that, looked at all the different Scion cards on FFTX.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's nothing that searches backups.
Nope.
It's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Minfilia technically does if you pitch them, but like
So here's the thing: is like you could do an interesting loop with Alphanod finding Minfilia to find your other Scions, or you have to open up with Minfilia to find
anyways,
Alice
because
to play Alphanod. Like those are the 2 pieces that could potentially save the archetype. But then you're playing Earth Fire, and you might as well play a different archetype in Earth Fire.
Yeah.
Because I will say, I will give Scions credit. Minfilia into Alphanod is very strong.
Yeah.
Because then you just play Alice Alphanod, and then you search your next backup. And you have 2 forwards developed.
Yeah. I think that as far as
with Science.
I-
Go ahead, Travis.
I think as far as cheaper decks go, if you're just like a newer player and you're trying to get into the game, I think you should probably be playing something very linearly aggro, something very forward centric. But I don't think you should be playing Scion simply because of the fact that they're so weak to a lot of things that are good in the meta right now. It's like they just kind of keel over to good removal and efficient removal and good blockers. Like,
well, not only that, but like one good field wipe like takes down Papalimo, which then takes down Thancred, which means that Yida is no longer a 10k. She's like a 6, and then she falls over too.
Yeah. I mean,
And-
another thing that I could consider handing to a new player is like people don't really realize it, but Rampere is actually a really budget deck. Like if you're not shilling out for like Sephiroths and Fusoyas and what's the other one I was thinking of?
if you do like like Renoas and stuff like that, I get
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
like,
it's like a budget-ish list.
Yeah, if you did an Earth Lightning like 15 Rampere list, it's like $35.
Yeah, and it'll still be good enough to get you wins and teach you the fundamentals of the game, because sometimes Rampere on turn 2, breaking it and playing Shantoto off of Kane is still just good enough to win the game.
Yeah. As long as you dodge Ratsu, it's fine.
Yeah.
And even then, like when you're playing Earth Lightning 15, it's still like an aggressive deck that a majority of your forwards replace themselves. Like the 2-drop Noctis, picking up Gladio, chef's kiss. And then Gladio's a 2-drop, 9k at that point.
For sure.
And then after that, if you play Ignis or you play Core, who's also another 2-drop, all of a sudden you have a 7k Brave Beater, you have a 5k attacker, and then you have a 9k beater.
Yeah.
You could win, and then like Gladio by himself can win the game. Because if you manage to pull off Cyclone, you're winning that game.
Oh, for sure.
And like that's the reason Gladio is so like loved over in Japan, is because Gladio solo carries so many games over in Japan with that 7.
He's a cheap, efficient threat that has late game scaling, which is almost always good.
So the whole I can only play him off Earth CP, you just have to discard a card and you're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So with like Rampere with just Earth and Lightning, you also get a little bit extra room to kind of actually play cards that can combat Amaterasu too.
Exactly.
Yep.
So Byron, Noah, any thoughts?
Yeah. So I was going through and looking at all the different Scions, and
all things
like,
considered,
there's a lot.
They're pretty
But
awful.
the issue is like
all things considered, they're pretty awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not. There's nothing that like stands out. Like the only ones that stand out are the recent ones, and even then, like when you want to build a Scion, if you attempt to build a Scion deck, for instance, it's so linear.
Yeah.
The card
Yeah, it is a bit of a helmet deck. I'd have to agree.
and the Lightning Alpha analysis. And like you're so restricted on the choices you can make. Like why play 3-drop Haste Yustola when 4-drop Yustola has Raven can kill something potentially. You know what I mean?
Well, but and you see that, and like there's my other problem with Scions. Look at all the name clashing that's in that.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's too much. There are, let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Yustolas out of 24 Scions.
And the worst part about it is there's 3 Thancrids. 3.
Mm-hmm.
And the backup's the best of all of them. The forwards are terrible. Oh, I take 2k less if I'm dull. When the fuck are you gonna be dull, dude?
There's 4 Thancrids. But yeah.
Oh, there's 4?
Yeah, there's a 4-drop. There's a 3-drop. There's the 2-drop backup, and then there's 7-drop Thancred.
Yeah, the water lightning one.
But yeah, the 7-drop Thancred, you're not gonna see him in a Scions list.
Yeah.
No. You'll see him in, like, for instance, the water lightning attack deck I play. It, like, way more better. Dude, that deck's cool. It's not great, but it's cool.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
I think the issue is there's no color fixing within Scions in and of itself. There's too much name clashing, and it's just too spread out with its colors.
Yeah, and if you really like break it down,
which I guess just links back to the first point.
Yeah, if you really break it down, where's their boss monster? Like you have 10 for Samurai, you have 10s in Cyan for Samurai, and then you have Beatrix for Knights. and like Ramza is like their
Mhm.
finisher, or Agris as their finisher, where's Scion's big boss monster? And don't say 4-cost Yustola because she
Scion.
requires there being 5 other Scions to actually be good.
Yeah.
So people would say, because it's a fun trap, people would say Yida, but Yida requires Scions as well. There really isn't one.
Yeah.
Scions doesn't have that one card they can put on board that's a threat without there being other Scions on board.
They
They
need
need themselves to function.
they need a standalone boss monster that doesn't name clash.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yep.
what they need. They would be a very playable deck if they just had a standalone boss monster that didn't name clash and was in lightning or earth.
Or I think what would be cool is like if they got the edge treatment, where if they got a Scion that makes all your Scions cost 1 less and you pay CP of any element to play them.
Exactly. That would be another really good
Yeah.
example, because then you could just play things. Like, you could just play whatever you wanted to play.
Mm-hmm. So, Noah, do you have a recommendation of a different deck for someone to play then if they said they really wanted to play Scions?
If they really wanted to play Scions, honestly, with the way the meta is, it's probably not the best. But I think Cadets is also, if they want to play like a tribal deck, I think Cadets is also something you can just
Cadets is,
have them play to learn
and
the
even then,
fundamentals.
like Cadet, like
personally.
and like as opposed to like Scions being like $20, like $20-$30, you build Cadets for 10.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. The only name clashing you have in Cadets that matters is Ace.
Yeah.
Even then,
That's it.
you just play the one from Opus 9.
Honestly, yeah,
Oh,
like
yeah. And
your Cadets is pretty straightforward.
Travis, isn't that sad that like the second weakest tribe has a better boss monster that lets you draw 2 cadets and then does 2k for every cadet you control?
Yeah. If Ace was in almost like
Yep.
any other tribe, he would just make that tribe just so good. But he's stuck in Cadets, sadly.
Could you imagine if he was a samurai? You know how dog shit that'd be?
Oh god, that would
But
be so
what they need
gross.
to do, honestly, so like for Cadets, for instance, what they need to do is have some way of mixing the Class 0 and the Agito properly, but there isn't.
No.
Class 0 has a lot of support. Agito is too everywhere else.
Right.
But
Byron,
there's
no
no real way to do
Sorry,
that.
I'm just
so.
trying to hear what Noah's saying because like it just keeps breaking out for me, so I can't even hear what he's talking about. I'm just trying to put it together.
It's doing that for some of you guys too. Don't worry, it's not just me.
What?
Yeah.
So I don't know, like I would just honestly just suggest Modifier. Modifier is cheap enough, and you can still play the 2 Scion Fire cards.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah.
Or go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
I was gonna say is that you can actually like if they're still a fan of 14, you can actually build them a mono fire 14 deck, and it's actually really good because there's the 6-drop Gaius that lets you search for Ridobon or whatever it is, the 2-drop 7k Brave that you can only play if you have a 14 forward that has like the Magitech missile for 10k.
Yeah.
Like you can still play 14 and you can play like a mono fire 14 list where you can play like Frida and then you have access to Alice Alphanod and then you get to play Lise instead of Yida and be able to dragon kick things. And then if you really wanted to, you could play around with some.
You do get a small samurai engine.
Yeah, with like the Gotetsu and Hien and like, and with Gaius, you're able to 3k your opponent's like forwards and actually have a proactive game plan.
Yep.
And I think the other thing I would probably suggest, like over Scions, if they really wanted like Travis was mentioning, like a forward centric like base deck, you could still like you could go with like category 9, or I would like I'm still a firm believer in introducing someone to category 7 because you can't screw up 7. You literally can't.
There's so much fucking support for 7. It's insane.
Yeah. Like you'd literally have to stick your deck with like 15 Vincents and 15 Barretts and then the rest of it's just backups, right? Like you don't even care what the backups are.
Just in fire alone, there's 23 Category 7 fire cards, which
Yeah.
is funny because there's like 24 to 25 Scion cards.
Yeah. The fact that an entire archetype has a whole subsection bigger than Scions.
Yep.
And like here's the thing, right? Is like Hobby Japan and Squeenix can really promote 14 I mean we are getting those new 14 decks that are coming out, the dual
Yeah.
decks.
Yep.
Hopefully that might be able to open like Scion's wings a little bit and give them access to either other elements or really bring them a linchpin card in Earth. Because I think mono Earth Scions is actually doable.
Yeah. So another thing that I was thinking along the lines of like edge for Scions would be, if not, it doesn't even have to reduce the cost. It just needs to say you can pay for your Scions with like any color. And then it also needs to say you can have more than one Scion of the same name on board at a time.
Oh,
like,
so you automatically just start playing titled in a
yeah.
standard.
Yeah, so that
Dude,
that would solve
It'd be so busted.
with the
It
deck.
would be, though.
It would just solve so many issues with the deck.
So like a category 14 Warrior of Light that says that you can play like same name category 14 characters.
It doesn't even have to be category 14. It can just be Scion trait characters. Because I think if you just made it category 14, that would be a little too strong.
And it just kind of opens the door.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But I think just giving it to Scions as like their linchpin card that really helps them out, because it says they can play whatever colors they want and play whatever dudes they want without really having to worry about it. That would solve Scions.
So here's a funny rules question for you then, Travis. So if I have like 3 Y'shtolas and like 2 Alisays and 2 Ulfanauts, and then they kill that 4
BRB.
that's letting me play titled, what happens?
I mean, the rules kick back into effect, and you have to choose one to keep, and you sack the rest.
How could this happen to me?
Like it's the same thing with the. God, I remember having this rules interaction come up in a game once.
When like they break chaos and you have like 2.
Yes.
Well, if you have 2 Dark Forwards, they both automatically go to the break zone. So logic withstanding, all of your Scions would go to the break zone. It is a literal TPK.
Yeah. I don't know. That's awkward.
Then that's how this could happen to me starts playing.
Yeah. I mean, it could also just be a backup. That would also work, like a 3 CP backup or a 4 CP backup.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not really. I think if you made it a 4 CP backup, it would be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because they actually have to commit some amount of resources to keep it on the board, and it's harder to remove. So,
all right, I think that this is a pretty good stopping point for us to go to the post show.
Yeah, I agree.
Ditto.
It's been fun. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you're currently watching, go ahead and keep watching and see
Until Noah stops being a robot.
post show. We'll talk. Seem good. See you guys then.
Deuces.
See ya. Sayonara.
Post show.
Goodbye.
All right.